Welcome back to another edition of Forecast Lab. It is August 2nd. We are heading into the late part of summer. Looking at the past 30 days, a lot of areas around the eastern and central parts of the country have received generous precipitation amounts. You can see that just about everywhere is yellow, and that indicates everybody's gotten about 2 to 3 inches around the east and central part of the country. Some isolated areas, red, 5 to 10 inches, and some isolated areas as high as 15 inches, especially down there around Houston. Before we head into the chart sequence, I'll let you take a look at the 500 millibar chart. Large anticyclone across the Salt Lake City area. There's that anticyclonic flow extending all the way down to Texas, so this does form a little bit of a ridge all the way down to West Texas, and we've got that flow around the south side, easterly to southerly flow through Arizona and New Mexico. A weak upper level low off of Los Angeles, northwesterly flow through the north central U.S. into the Great Lakes area, and a upper level trough with a closed low across the Toledo and Detroit region. And checking in on the tropics at 11 p.m. Eastern, we've got Tropical Depression 4, and this is probably pretty close to turning into Tropical Storm Debby. Maximum sustained winds at this time, 30 miles an hour. We need 40 miles an hour for a tropical storm. Central pressure rather high, 1010 millibars. Here we've got the official National Hurricane Center track on the left, and the interpolated track, which is adjusted for current data. That's going to be on the right. Both of those landfalls located well north of Tampa. We don't have the 0Z data in just yet, but this is a couple of different products from the Global Forecast System, the GFS, and the Global Ensemble Forecast System. The main run, deterministic, high resolution, that's going to be that thick red line, pretty much going in the same area as the NHC forecast. We've also got the corrected version, the interpolated track right there, going a little bit closer to Tampa. The rest of the plots on here, that's going to be from the ensemble. We've got, I don't know if you can read this, but the AEMN, that's going to be the average track of the ensembles, or I should say the mean track. That's going to be that thick, what is that, kind of a light red line right there. And then hidden beneath all that is a thin yellowish line right there. That is the control run for the ensembles. And by control run, we mean that we are running it the same way as all of the ensembles, but without introducing perturbations. So it's kind of a pure version of the ensembles. And there's the ensembles. Again, this is 18Z. We don't have the 0Z data in, but nearly all of the ensembles pretty much going between Tampa and Apalachicola. Just a few outliers out there near Pensacola. Tallahassee located right in here. Gainesville, I think, somewhere in here, and Lake City. So this is going up into a relatively unpopulated area of Florida. At least that's the way it looks right now. The flip side of the story, of course, will be what happens when it emerges on the other side, because there are some favorable conditions for development off of the Carolinas. Looking at the infrared imagery, this is a good way to gauge the convection that we have, because those do feed into the self-development of these tropical cyclones. Early on, yeah, there's plenty of convection. And as we go into the afternoon and evening hours, you can see a circulation start to become established right there along the southern coast of Cuba. Looking at the Dvorak satellite imagery, though, it does look a little bit disorganized, but starting to see a little bit of a symmetric appearance to the cloud field. Don't have a central dense overcast, still kind of a large area of scattered or broken cloud layers, but it is, of course, in the process of organizing. Here's a quick look at the GFS forecast. This is going to be the winds at the surface with the streamlines. There's the low pressure center between Jamaica and southern Cuba. And over the next, 24 hours, you can see it drifting up there towards Havana. The model not really capturing a closed circulation very well, but it's got this little low pressure area. Yeah, it looks like right around there, 15Z, starting to show a distinct center. I guess the landmass must have been tearing that up. And then we see that moving up into the area just off of western Florida, not coming inland. That's going to be the latest frame we have right now. The model is still being built at this time. And here's the European model. We definitely don't have the 0Z data, so we're going back to the 18Z run, but you can kind of follow along and see that same scenario. Low pressure area moving across Havana, that's probably developing into a tropical storm, and moving off the coast of Tampa and right up into that same area southeast of Apalachicola. And of course, it ends up along the coast near Charleston, South Carolina. Now here we go back to the GFS run, and I've got it frozen on Sunday night. Now the deterministic models, both the GFS and the ECMWF, going for a coastal system out over the open waters, and you can see it deepening down to the 970s by Wednesday and Thursday and moving up the coast. And that's probably a low-end hurricane, considering that there's a lot of uncertainty where it's going to make landfall. What's going to happen after that is a big unknown. This could very well drift inland and dissipate, but there's also the possibility something could strengthen off of the coast of the Carolinas. So if you're in that part of the country, you definitely want to take your precautions, make sure you're all stocked up, just in case something happens offshore. Elsewhere around the country, yeah, we're 6 minutes in and just getting to the rest of the nation. This map is a little bit old because I did a lot of preparation earlier and didn't get to putting the recording together until now. But just looking around the country, frontal system from Pennsylvania all the way down to Texas, you can see that warm northerly flow. 80s and 90s behind the cold front, so that's a heavily modified Canadian air mass. Out ahead of it, ironically, a little bit cooler in some areas, but also a lot of precipitation. Dew points quite high in the 70s across the southeastern U.S. You contrast that with these 60s and lower 70s out there in the Midwest and central U.S. Out west, the monsoon definitely underway. Showers and storms all the way from Clayton and Trinidad back to the Four Corners and all the way to St. George, Kingman, and almost to the Phoenix area. Some very hot temperatures in different parts of the country. The key areas, the southwest, 111 at Phoenix, and they're expecting to get up to 115 for tomorrow. Another place getting some outrageous heat is the northwestern U.S. Let me show you the satellite imagery. Yeah, this is how it looked earlier this afternoon. Very hot conditions in the interior of Oregon and Washington. You can see wildfires breaking out in the, I think that's the Blue Mountains, all the way from Burns and Bend up to Spokane. And as we lose the illumination, you can see all that smoke there showing up very well in the visible imagery. And as we go into nighttime, you can see those heat specks, black, indicating very hot conditions, and that outlines where the wildfires are taking place. But thankfully, there's a special product we can use, the Natural Color and Fire channel. And it's a little bit hard to see, but you can make out some of those fires right there. And there's actually specialized websites that go in and dissect this and plot them on better maps where you can look up streets and roads. And one good site for that is going to be watchduty.org. You can see numerous fires there across Oregon, Washington, Idaho. I'm not really sure which one is the biggest, but if you zoom down, you can get an idea of the footprint and the size of those fires. So Thompson Fire right there, that's going to be just northwest of Ontario, Idaho, 31,000 acres burning. And this Monkey Creek Fire, that's going to be, let's see, south of Pendleton. I think that's also in the mountains, 175,000 acres. And if you click on these, you can get information on what those fires are doing. So a lot of good resources on the internet if you look around. Let's take a look elsewhere around the continent. A little bit of North Pacific high action off of the west coast, which is what we expect to see this time of year. The Gulf of Alaska also under high pressure. So this is more typical what we have in the summertime. That's bringing some pleasant conditions to southeastern Alaska. On the cool side, in the Alaskan interior, temperatures in the 40s and 50s, a little band of frontal precipitation all the way from Banks Island to northern Yukon and into the Alaskan interior. In the Arctic, temperatures in the 30s and 40s, a little bit of rain and clouds here and there. It is definitely on the cool side. We haven't had much warm air intrude up to the north. And then looking down south, the prairies looking pretty typical for this time of year. No heat waves. We did have one earlier this week. We had temperatures up in the 90s in parts of Alberta and I think Saskatchewan. Those temperatures have come down, but still 102 in the far southern part of that province. A lot of warm air across Ontario and Quebec into the St. Lawrence Seaway, and Newfoundland looks like they've had a little bit of a cool air incursion into that part of the country. I figured I'd show you this. This is some of that thunderstorm activity we got going on in eastern Colorado and western Nebraska, extending from about Ogallala to North Platte, down through Burlington, and over towards Pueblo. And this is putting out quite a bit of outflow. I can kind of paint out the outflow pools. Actually, I think that goes a little bit further, maybe something like that. That's all going to be outflow. And here's another outflow pool going about like this, all the way back to Colorado Springs, getting that strong northeasterly flow. And that probably arcs back something like that. So that's all outflow coming out from these storms, expanding in all directions. And there's the other outflow pool. So a lot to look at here on these surface charts. There's the inflow into the storm area, but dew points only in the lower 60s. And on the single station radar out of Pueblo, yes, you can see the outflow. There it is, driving south through, I guess, Eads, Kit Carson. No, it's going to be Eads. And, yeah, pretty much pushing all the way through Pueblo, and then we kind of lose it. But if you go to the Denver radar, in fact, we can do that right now. We'll see if we can pick up the back end at all. That'll take a second to load here. A couple of little areas of trailing stratiform precipitation. This will probably have some lightning out around Lyman. And we're waiting for the radar to come up. There it is. Yeah, this is the area I was talking about. That's trailing stratiform precip. Tends to be very rich in electrical activity. And on the backside, I don't think so. I think maybe it's kind of banked up like that, and then maybe extending north. I'm just kind of guessing here. I would probably go back to the surface data and start looking at stuff. But another thing you can look at is the velocity. So what does the velocity show? That shows southerly flow. So that's probably originating from the outflow from that storm. You can see one characteristic of that outflow in terms of dew points. Dew points are in the 50s for the most part. When you get away from it, they fall off into the 40s. So that right there tells me the outflow is probably running maybe something like this. And maybe even this is generated by a little bit of that lift associated with that outflow. Is that actually stuff? Sometimes those are wind turbines. No, that looks like precip. And it does have vertical extent, so that's probably on that boundary. So how are things going to change? We're going to return to this 500 millibar chart, take it in and look at that high pressure there over the western U.S., look at that troughing in the Great Lakes, and that big low out there in the eastern Pacific. That's out to the west of us, but this whole area is the eastern Pacific. So we're talking about that low right there. And let's see what happens over the weekend and the start of next week. No big changes immediately. We still got that high parked over the Four Corners area. If we use Bayes-Ballott's law, that high is actually going to be kind of in here, I think, over Utah, because we've got that northerly flow rounding that high pressure area. Definitely some anticyclogenesis in the western part of Canada. In fact, this is actually a blocking pattern. This is a Rex block. Got that trough here digging underneath this ridge. So getting a little bit blocky out west there, and that could lock in the pattern a little bit. Strong Hudson Bay low out there in Quebec. bringing northwesterly flow into the Great Lakes. So we're looking at Monday. Let's see what happens going into the middle of the week and late next week. So yeah, we're seeing the toll that this blocking is taking. Still looking at a Rex block across western Canada. Southwesterly flow into Alaska. That's going to be kind of wet and warm for them, and still hanging on to that Hudson Bay low. So the patterns are not changing very much. Down south, though, definitely some weakening of that subtropical high. That is significant, so that will spell maybe some moderation of the weather that we've got going on. Maybe a little bit of a decrease in the monsoon. We're getting a little bit of southerly flow there, so maybe not totally going away. But typically, to bring that monsoon air, it helps to have a very strong high parked over Texas, and that increases the flow coming in to the southwestern U.S. Then we get to the very end of the run. That's going to be 234 hours there. Well, not much change. Continued ridging out there in Canada, kind of a the Rex block kind of flipping over a little bit, ejecting this wave down south into the U.S., but still troughing out to the east, and just kind of a very weak subtropical high across the southwestern U.S. Okay, let's go ahead and go into that forecast, starting with the weather right now, picking up that cluster there in eastern Colorado. Going overnight into tomorrow, up to the afternoon, this is what we have. Looks like there's a front on its way south. I did not get a chance to draw the fronts in, but I'll kind of give you the general scoop. The north-central U.S. looking at a heat wave in this area right here. Rapid City expecting to get up to 104. Phillip, South Dakota, looking for 105. Slight risk of severe thunderstorms for central and southwestern Minnesota, so there's probably a warm front right in here associated with that slight risk area. Tropical storm begins approaching Florida from the south, so that'll be in the headlines for sure. And very hot in south-central Texas with 103, the hottest day of the week at San Antonio. Also, yeah, major heat wave in the southwestern U.S. looking for 115 at Phoenix and 106 at Tucson. And there's the overnight conditions tomorrow night. Then going into Sunday, got a pretty strong front up there in the northern plains. Tropical storm moving across Florida. This is probably a little bit too far east. We'll have to kind of see what the track does tomorrow. Heat wave continues in the southwestern U.S., looking for 112 at Las Vegas. And very hot in the high plains, looking for 100 degrees at Denver with 104 at Chadron. So there's Chadron, there is Denver. So certainly a little bit of downslope flow going on. Then we go into Monday. This tropical storm makes its way into the Carolinas. We don't know the exact position on that. Could be inland. Anyway, definitely some rain potential there. Also, rain expected in Minnesota again, but a big cool down to 74 for a high at Minneapolis and only 65 at Bismarck. That would be really nice to have about now. Monsoon rains continue there in Arizona. We're going to be seeing temperatures up to the 100s once again in the northwestern states. Then we go into the rest of the week. You just kind of follow along. Looks like a coastal system. That is, if it does not move inland. And we go into Friday and Saturday. Looks like a front making it down into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Some pretty good isotropic lift back there across Kansas for Friday. And just kind of a stationary boundary through that area. Kind of like that for next weekend. And that brings us to the very end. That's going to be about right there, 240 hours. This is Monday, August the 12th. So stationary front through here. Good potential for rains in the central U.S. and the eastern U.S. And the monsoon looks like it's continuing to keep going. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. I'm going to close out with something a little bit different. This is the eclipse from October 14th, not the big one from April. This is the one back last fall. The light a little bit subdued, but maybe you'll see something. I don't know. Anyway, that's a look at how it looks across the country and the update on that storm. and we'll see you back here on Monday for the supporters and on Wednesday for everybody else. Take care, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.